So this is the Affordable Housing Committee special meeting of Wednesday, January 26, 2022. It is now 7:07 p.m. We're meeting again via Zoom. I think we have a number of, I know from the commission or committee, we have the chairman, Steve Brathwell, we have Carrie Mackover, Joanne Romanizanka, and Gwyn Alperovich, and we also have our consultant, Glenn Chalder, and we have several members of the public as well as prospective members of the committee, and recording secretary, Gretchen Gertner. So Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development, Master of Ceremonies for this evening. Steve, I'll turn it over to you at this point for the formal call to order and the rest of the business agenda.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for everybody for joining us. We do have a number of members of the public and soon to be members of the committee. Ordinarily, I would say that only committee members, can ask questions and make comments because of the format that we're doing, the Zoom format. But we need as much input as possible on the Affordable Housing Plan update. And so if anybody would like to make a comment, please raise your hand in the chat or in the window, and we'll try to acknowledge you and get your comments. Let's see, for today, it's the discussion on the Affordable Plan update, which will be talking about the plan itself, the executive summary, the potential processing calendar, and to me, one of the key things is the priorities. What are the 2, 3, 4, 5 priorities we're going to focus on, our goals, and hopefully we'll have time to talk about the annual report that the Affordable Housing Committee delivers each year to the RTM. And we have to do that next week, is it, Mark, or the week thereafter?
Well, we should turn in the annual report this month, and then we'll be on the RTM's agenda for February, and I'll get those dates for you.
Good. Okay. And also, I should mention that Mark did send out a quick little survey regarding the goals, and hopefully everybody looked at it and gave Mark your comments.
Would you like the results of their survey, or we want to go right into...
No, I think that would be a good place to start.
So very interesting feedback, but thank you all for answering a few quick questions. We're trying to get an idea of where our priorities lie. The first question we posed was, what should our primary goal be? And we had a split response fairly evenly between all 4 options. We had a number of folks voting for achieving a moratorium as quickly as possible, but there are also a number of votes for providing a wider range of housing options. One person indicated that all of the above should be our priorities. And then another caveat, another vote was towards providing a wide range of housing options with a focus on affordable and workforce housing. So, I think it underscores some of the debates we've been having internally through these meetings as to what our primary objective is through this planning effort. And I know we're trying to do all of these, but at the end of the day, it's helpful to kind of drill down as to what's first and foremost in our minds. Then when we looked at the strategies in order of priority, again, fairly instructive in that most of it was pretty well evenly split. So again, the ones that scored the highest, and these were weighted averages based on people's ranked order, but amending the town's DRD regulations was one of the higher ranked items, as was amending the town's zoning regulations to increase the affordable set aside. Those both scored over 5.5 points. Similarly, we also had working with the housing authority to identify town-owned property on which to create assisted housing units, that also scored equally well. And then just behind that were establishing design guidelines to promote affordable and middle housing, as well as incentivizing property owners to deed restrict housing units through tax abatements or other financial inducements. The one that scored the lowest was enhancing the housing trust fund by increasing the fee. So that was decidedly, not preferred. So again, a number of opinions there. And then in terms of other strategies that weren't listed, I think there was some comments about repurposing vacant properties, looking at, I don't know if they were town-owned or other. And then another comment about extending the length of the deed restrictions so that we have more, a longer affordability period. So I guess it was somewhat helpful, but again, it was instructive that nothing. There are a couple that did come out on top in terms of the strategies. I think those have been the ones we've focused on mostly. So I guess that confirms some of our discussions all along the way in terms of where we should, what strategies we think are most viable or most important. But again, opinions are still pretty split. So Glenn's going to pull it all together for us. I have no doubt. So with that, I'll turn it over to Glenn.
Well, so before Glenn solves all our problems, let me just say a couple of things for Janice and Nina's benefit. And when I get done saying this, people who don't agree can also chime in. But we're the Affordable Housing Committee, and our charge is to help increase the housing options in town with a focus on affordable housing. We are subject to 830G, the state regs, because we do not have 10% affordable housing. We will forever be subject to 830G because I don't see that there's any way we can ever get to 10%. Getting a moratorium, which is a 4-year period where we are not really subject to 830G, is not, quote, a goal. It should be an outcome that is achieved because of other things that we do. But a really big benefit of the moratorium is that it allows the town to control what happens, or better to control what happens. And as it stands right now, because of 830G, developers can make an application for a project that maybe we don't like the way it looks, maybe it's too big for the neighborhood, and other concerns. To me, it's not good urban planning, but it is the law. And so our goal, again, is increase housing options, increase affordable housing, and hopefully in doing that, we will gain a first, second moratorium, third moratorium, et cetera. So that's my little preface to Glenn's start.
Is there a motion to adjourn? All right, just
not getting off that easy.
Just yeah. I think since our last meeting, I took the comments that people provided in terms of the report and incorporated those into that report, and then slashed and burned my way through to an executive summary. I think the executive summary at this stage is just to illustrate to the committee how the results of the entire plan can be, I guess, winnowed down to a more or less intimidating document with a higher level overview of the types of strategies that we want to recommend. I think it's most likely that most people will review the executive summary and not necessarily understand the detail that goes into each of these particular strategies. But I think that the Affordable Housing Committee over the next 5 years in terms of this plan, and as you know, the state's requiring that no municipal plan be older than 5 years. In terms of the implementation, for the committee to get into the weeds a little bit more in terms of what the particular strategies are and could be, and how to prioritize those efforts, et cetera, moving ahead. So I think tonight it's probably most useful if we feel that the executive summary is a reasonable approach. Perhaps then we park that as a model for where we hope to end up in the not too distant future. But I think the committee needs to weigh in on the larger report, as Steve talked about some of the priorities or strategies or other things to move the report forward. I think Mark and I did have some conversations about the overall schedule. The surprising thing is that, you know, June 1 kind of, when you're in the middle of winter, June 1 sounds like it's far away. Yeah. Realistically, you look at the number of weeks and it's not that far away given the requirements that we have for coordination with others. The statutory requirement for public notification for a public hearing on adoption, and our desire to perhaps have a public informational meeting at some point in the spring. And then complicating all of that, I booked some travel in the let's call it the first 2 weeks of March, not realizing that the time crunch would come in the way it has. With affordable housing plan. So it sounded like a great idea at the time, but I hadn't really kind of figured that it would work this way. What that means is that there's 2 weeks where I hope to have internet service and be able to participate in things, but I may not. I won't really know until probably sometime next week or the week after. So I think in our meeting tonight, in our next scheduled meeting, which is February 9, hopefully we can get to the point where we can then refine the document to the point we're ready to share it with planning and zoning and others as appropriate and move forward in terms of the overall schedule. So that's my thought on how to proceed, and I look forward to your comments and feedback.
Glenn, let me ask you, it looks like we have 4 months to get this done. February, March, April, and May, 16 weeks. So I've got that blocked out in my mind. But did you just say that we need to have a 45-day period before the end of May? So we've got to be like almost done middle of, I don't know, beginning of March?
I think what the schedule that Mark and I had suggested would be that our normal meeting in May would be May 11.
Mm-hmm.
Just let me check that just to make sure.
Yeah.
That would be our normal meeting day in May. And so that could be a logical date for a public hearing on adoption. And what that does is that it gives the committee an opportunity to adopt the plan, and still gives us a week or so to go to the Board of Selectmen and get their endorsement of the plan that the committee's adopted. So if we were to go with May 11th, Steve, then 35 days before that, the proposed plan has to be posted on the internet website of the municipality, and that's roughly April 4. So realistically, we have January's close to the end. So realistically, we have February and March to address the major configurational issues of the plan, so that we can then pull the trigger. And again, as I indicated, silly me, some kind of planner I am, I booked 2 weeks of travel in the middle of all of that.
Yeah.
So it's tight but doable.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the committee understood the timeframes and the constraints thereof. Yeah, so
is somebody going to revise this then? This is what I have, but
Revise, what am I looking at?
you're looking at possible process schedule?
Yes, yeah, I was just gonna say, I need to refine that schedule a bit more.
Yeah.
Certainly talking to planning and zoning staff, we had discussed having a joint planning meeting with the commission, since many of our strategies involve changes to zoning. It only seems natural that we would build in another working session with the Planning and Zoning Commission to discuss them, make sure that they're comfortable, at least with the approach that we're taking, maybe not all the specifics. And then I think, we typically on something like this, we may want to build in a presentation to the Board of Selectmen prior to their voting to accept it. It's been my experience that on topics like these, where there's a fairly detailed report, the selectmen may want to have some time to review it, ask questions, and then subsequently vote to accept the plan. They don't necessarily do it all in one meeting. And so they do meet twice a month typically. So I did briefly discuss this with the first select woman, but again, I need to spend a little bit more time with her chief of staff and with the planning and zoning department to refine the schedule a bit more. But I think the basic outline that Glenn has laid out, the framework here is what we need to observe.
Okay.
good.
I think the key dates are in here. I think as we outlined here also in the schedule, the period between April 4 and May 11 is not lost time, in the sense that we have to have public notice of the plan that's going to public hearing. But if as a result of our work and efforts, it becomes apparent to us that there's some additional modifications or tweaks that are required, we would go to the public hearing with the proposed plan and not an errata sheet, but a possible edits or modification sheet. Mm-hmm. And then both would be presented. So it's not dissimilar from what happens in some planning and zoning applications and other types of things. It's meant to be, due process where people are aware of what's going on. And there is that 35-day notice period for the bulk of the plan, and then a subsequent sheet, if you will, for tweaks or changes that may be made. So we can make use of the 5 weeks between April 4 and May 11.
Good.
Okay.
So general thoughts on the 8-page summary. I felt after I was done, I thought it kind of summarized the highlights, and I thought most people would sort of grasp, if you will, the major strategic directions that we were going in. And it doesn't get into the nitty-gritty detail, but it does talk about sort of the key strategies in terms of different types of units or procedures. So I thought that we can do more to make this visual and graphic, but I thought as a kind of a basic framework, this could work. Does the committee feel comfortable that this is a reasonable approach? Is it too few, too many pages? What are your thoughts?
I have some comments, but let me throw it open to the others first, and then I'll give you my comments.
I have some comments, which is it not possible to take this title page here and put some of the information that you have just a little further in all on one page, just to make it smaller, like this page, which is you know, the letter to the residents of the Fairfield, just make a combined
Sure.
page. I mean, I think the smaller you can get it, the better off everybody is. I thought you could possibly combine that. And then going through it, I just had some questions. I don't understand how we're going to get to 220, 211 units under deed restricted. And that's on page 4 in that box near the bottom where it says deed restricted, 2,211 units likely to be recognized in the 2022 list. How does it happen from 124 to 211?
I think I think that's from your moratorium spreadsheet, Mark, based on the units that are coming online. The state, how many units came online in calendar year 2021 is essentially what it comes down to. The state does it sort of on a calendar year basis. And so
we would have already submitted this. I'd have to pull up what we submitted to the state for 2022. So I can get that number, assuming the state agrees with the number of units that we submitted with the requisite documentation, then that's the number we'll use.
Okay.
And so, Carrie, the reason the numbers are highlighted here in yellow is because I've been in contact with the Department of Housing, and they indicate that they feel that their 2022 reports, the Affordable Housing Appeals List, will be issued in March, beginning of March. Mm-hmm. And as soon as those numbers come out, we're going to plug those numbers in. So everywhere there's a highlighted number means, Glenn, don't forget to change this number based on the new spreadsheet.
Okay.
So that text about what we expect or anticipate will in fact be the actual number for the next calendar year.
Okay. And then on page 6, where it says seek to obtain moratoria from the Affordable Housing Appeals process, I just wanted to know, it's like another phrase, why we need a moratorium. And a moratorium is the 4 years that gives us time to do some serious planning. So I just wanted to say seek to obtain moratoria from the Affordable Housing Appeals process in order to do it, whatever it is we're going to do. So I just thought that could be one additional 7 words somehow.
Yep.
And then on page 7, where it says consider promoting universal design, I think that needs also further explanation. Maybe put universal design in quotes with capital U and capital D, and talk about a 1-sentence summary of what universal design is and why it's a benefit to all housing. And then on page 8, the first paragraph you have, it says the next 5 few years. And I think you mean, I don't think you need the word few, just the next 5 years. And I had one other comment, but I'm going to stop.
I should have said the next 5 short years, Carrie, is that?
5 short years is better, but
nice catch, thank you.
Next few years or next 5 short years.
Few is extraneous there.
Yeah, it's a little extraneous, yeah. And then when I see the sentence that reads, the DEC manages a number of programs related to affordable housing, but does not have the time, resources to accomplish everything this planned recommends, it leaves me wanting more information. I mean, I don't disagree with that. That's certainly true, but it's like, it's a challenge somehow, you know, like maybe it needs.
We have the rest of the plan that people could go to. If that's what you're referring to, Carrie, that they need more information.
I go, so what? You know, so what? So what does that mean? Okay, it doesn't have the time and resources, so none of this will happen. Or that
personally, I didn't think that the section really added much value to the reader's understanding. So I don't know if we need section 4. Maybe we could combine an implementation in the strategy section of 3.
The document is laid out as an 8-page document because if it's published as in paper form, 8 pages is a typical sort of booklet size. An odd number of pages means there's a blank page someplace because you have 2 sides to a piece of paper. And so it was laid out in a little bit sort of a desktop publishing format. So the most useful pagination is 4 and 8 or 12. And you can certainly do with less than that, but the actual publication of it ends up being just a little bit different. So in my efforts, I kept going till I got to a multiple of 4, where it seemed to settle. So I think that there is room, as you point out, Carrie, to consolidate some of the pages, and that lets the document breathe more, and we can put more pictures and imagery in. But again, this is the child of the other document. So the other document will provide the main guidance, if you will, and then this would be the summary, and people would, for more information, go to the other document. But I think most people will gravitate towards this one.
I think most people will stop with this, actually.
So I can jump in, Glenn. So I thought that it was too long and had too much stuff that was going to be available in the plan itself. My thought about an executive summary is that it'd be 2 pages, 3 pages, and that it would focus mostly on, all right, Carrie, 4 pages, mostly on what it is we're going to attempt to accomplish, what our goals are, our priorities. The more I think about it, when people read the executive summary, especially when people at TPZ or the Board of Selectmen or RTM, if they read the executive summary, they're going to flip right through to everything and get to, all right, what's this mean for the next 5 years? What's going to happen? What are they proposing? And that, to me, is what I would focus on. I'd get rid of the graphics. I'd make it as short as possible. Let me just see. My outline was the cover, if you have to have it. The letter was okay. Would want to tweak the writing of it. If we needed an intro, we'd have an intro. We'd have something about the need. But then it's the vision and the priority statements. Priority strategies. And then the last, I thought something about the future, just a sentence or 2 about what's around the corner between now and year 5 or year 7, which is the missing middle, desegregate Connecticut, small lot housing, etc. Because, it's a moving, it changes. And so we're going to set this into writing, but as soon as it's done, the environment is going to start to change bit by bit. And we should sort of know where the winds are blowing.
I think 4 pages is doable. I think the key pages in here that I think that we as the committee would want most people to know are actually pages 6 and 7. These are our strategies for the future. They lay out on 2 pages. So whether it's an 11 by 17 piece of paper folded or what it is, you open it up and there are the strategies. So the front page is actually, as Carrie pointed out, sort of the cover letter and the other stuff. It's all consolidated down. Why we're doing this, why it's important for Fairfield, the areas we need to cover succinctly on 1 page. And then I do think on the last page, on the back outside, most people don't know what the term affordable housing means, and my inclination would be to put that information there by when we use this phraseology or terminology, what we mean. And then I think that could provide sort of an overview. So I can make that happen.
Okay. Oh, so, but let me ask everybody else, committee members and Mark and other folks, what do they think? Should it be 2 pages or 8 pages or 12? Herb says shorter is better. I agree with Herb.
I think that giving the people something that they're not going to be going on run-on sentences or a lot of information that they're not going to read, we need to consolidate it down to, bullet point what we're doing. I think if you give people too much
favor.
Yeah.
Huh?
Another
No, if you
vote, another
give
vote
people
is
too much
shorter's better.
If you give people too much information, they're going to lose track of what they're doing and they're not going to finish reading it.
Right.
Yep, I agree.
And like when you were in school, when the teacher gave you too much work.
I was never able to get out of it, Joanne. I tried, but I never could. Okay,
Yeah,
so I think
I never got away with it either.
We didn't hear from Mark. Does Mark have an opinion?
Me? I'm not a committee member. No, I mean, if you 4 pages sounds good to me for the reasons that you just outlined. I think that, and Glenn just indicated how he would organize it. That sounded good to me as well. So.
Okay, and I'll assume that Janice and Nina and Gwen and Bob are sort of on board in that direction.
Yes. Shorter is definitely better. Grab people's attention, tell them exactly what they need to know, and then get them to read the entire thing later, right? You want to grab their attention.
Good, yes.
Thanks, Nina.
So I have more wordsmithing that I could give you at a later time. So
do you want to mark it up, Steve, and then it can perhaps get scanned and sent to me, or you want to schedule a meeting another time to go through it? What? Because it doesn't make sense to wordsmith stuff if it's going to go to 4 pages. So yeah. Would you prefer that I get it to 4 quickly and then I can send that to you?
Yes, I think that's the way to go.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
On the case.
Yeah.
You were ruthless, but not ruthless enough.
Yeah.
Well, no, but I think it's important for me to capture, I think, what the committee wishes in terms of how to present this information. Yeah. As you know, I've been working with you for almost a decade now in terms of affordable housing issues in Fairfield. I want to further your work, support your efforts. So I didn't want to go too short, and I didn't want to go too long. So I think executive summary will be very useful, I think, in that configuration. I think what that does is bring us back to the main report, whether or not we think we are capturing the main things that Fairfield should be working on for the next 5 years, how to prioritize those efforts. I do think that we had at one point in time talked about Affordable Housing Plan 3.0 and how it differed from earlier efforts. I think a large part of this probably needs to be coordination with planning and zoning. Steve, the article that you passed around today about their recent application that nobody was really very comfortable with. I think that this is an unfortunate situation from 830D. We can find ways to promote affordable housing developments that we think fit into Fairfield, meet the need, and don't create these types of scenarios. It could be, I think, a better outcome for everyone. So I think that we probably need to go a little bit beyond sort of the cheerleading and coordinating efforts that the committee has done in the past and really try to get to more changes like the Planning and Zoning Commission has done in the Commerce Drive area and some of the other areas. And maybe as we've talked about in the priorities from the survey that Mark did, reinvigorate the DRD and look at other opportunities or situations. I happened to be at a meeting last week with David Fink. David, his name may be a name that resonates with you guys. Somebody in the audience asked him a question in terms, he was doing a presentation for a regional project in the New Haven area. He asked him what he thought the set aside requirement should be for affordable housing. And he said 15 or 20%, which is the number that we were talking about. So I just thought that was sort of interesting that these types of evolutions of thought are different today, perhaps, than they were back in the 2014 plan, but things for us to talk about and think about. So I'd like to know how I can make this plan address the issues that are important to you and make this the best plan for Fairfield at this time.
Well, again, I think that from my point of view, it's important to pick out the 3 or 5 priority goals or steps that we're going to take. The last plan that you helped us put together, we had 11 action items, and I think we accomplished 5 of them or 6 of them, something like that. Knowing that it takes 2 to 3 years for a development to get approved and built. And so, so if housing gets approved 2.5 years from now, that's going to be part of the next plan and maybe the next moratorium. But I think we should have a discussion about the priority goals and see if we can get some agreement. Mark, what do you think?
I think that is the crux of the issue. Would you like to, Glenn has it outlined in the executive summary, or would you like me to attempt to screen share the 8 strategies that I put and ask people to rank in order, if you'd like to see that visually?
Is it not possible to show these strategies in the plan itself, or is that too voluminous?
It gets into the,
yeah.
I got them both queued up. I mean, I think the issue is the executive summary is fewer pages. So let me just bring that up for a second.
Fine, let's do that then.
So I think Herb posted a question in the chat, and I think his comment was very perceptive. I think that if we are going to set priorities for what it is we want to accomplish, I think that we can move these around to reflect, our presentation will reflect our priorities. Mm-hmm. Right now, I grouped them together as kind of families of thought in terms of things that I had heard the committee talking about. So for example, number 1 is moratorium exemption is the number 1 thing we've been working for. So that became 3.1. Assisted housing units are the deepest level of affordability that give us the most points and meet the most significant challenges in terms of affordable housing units. And the Housing Authority has been working on this. So I made that number 2. Number 3 is deed restricted. That's sort of the big challenge area. Years ago, the state did more in this area. They've sort of exported the concept of deed restricted to municipalities and the private sector to take care of. And the state now is focusing really only on assisted housing units. So I think it is important for municipalities to figure out whether or not we're going to be proactive on this or actually end up being reactive with 830Gs. And then I think 3.4 was the issue about the location of multifamily in town. I think there's certain areas where it works, other areas where it really doesn't. 3.5 was the importance of design, which is what residents had indicated through the survey. 3.6 was the issue about diversity and trying to provide more housing options. And then 3.7 was the idea about other affordable housing programs. That's the way I organized it based on what I thought were families of thought. But I think realistically, we can certainly move these around depending on the committee's priorities.
So that 3.1, I think it's a separate track. It should be on the side or just someplace different because it's an outcome of our other efforts.
I would agree with that. My initial thought was it's not really a strategy. It's more so a goal, or as you said, an outcome of our goal. If our goal is to provide a range of housing options focused on a more affordable or workforce housing, secondary or related or corollary goal is in doing so, achieve enough points for a moratorium so that we can reassert control over the process. by which we create affordable housing. So it's not really a strategy in my mind. It's more an overarching philosophy or goal or objective that we're trying to accomplish here.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
And then again, if we were focused on where people ranked things in terms of where, you know, if we were trying to prioritize based on this informal ranking, and again, this is subject to your review, the ones that were highest were amending the zoning regulations to increase the affordability set aside requirements from the current 10 to 12% to 15-20%. Revise the design residence district zoning overlay regulations in section 10 to provide more housing options. And then working with the housing authority to identify property on which to create assisted housing units. Those were the three that were weighted most heavily.
Do they show up on this list?
I think they do, Steve. I think the
Yeah.
first one that Mark indicated was increasing the affordability set aside is in here as 3.31. Are you looking at the executive summary or the full document?
I'm looking at now the executive summary.
So it's 3.31 in the executive summary. It should be the same number, I believe, in the full plan. So let me, I guess the section numbers are section 6 though.
Mm-hmm.
So the full plan would be 6.31. That's important, isn't it? To make this section, you got to make the section numbers the same.
So Mark, can you identify where they are in the housing strategies here? Ones
Yes,
you just
3.31, 3.36, and 3.21.
3.21. Okay. Good.
Those are the top three.
And the percentage one that's the 3.31.
Yeah.
And so we should have those numbers in there when we finish this document, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we can use the same language that I included in the strategy if you want. I think that would provide a little bit more context,
yeah,
so that people understand what we're talking about.
Okay, I agree.
Does anyone disagree with those top three or want to propose? Well, let me, immediately following the next tier down were establish preferred design guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
And then incentivize, and this is not, I don't think, on your strategies. I added one, Glenn. Incentivize property owners to deed restrict existing housing units through abatements or other financial inducements. I don't think that's on there, but maybe it is.
3.6.1 maybe? Yeah, go back a page at the top there. Is that 3.6.1?
This came out
top of the page.
conference.
Top of the page. Go on.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Again, I added a little bit more context to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the next tier down.
No, I like that.
Yeah. Well, so if you go back to 3.2, the other page, Glenn, the part in blue, the 3.2, what I felt, we can't just say we want to increase the number. We got to have a goal in there. Is it going to be 50 units we want to get, or is it 250?
Yeah, I think Steve, sometime back in the fall, I had asked the committee whether or not we wanted specific number references like units, and I didn't get traction on that, so I backed away from it. But I think I kind of like the way that this organization is starting to move in terms of specific priorities, et cetera. And I do think we could put targets on each of these.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, yeah, that I'm very comfortable with that.
And Mark, if we went with the top three, 3.2.1, 3.3, and 3.36. The ones in 3.3 are TPZ related, right?
Hmm.
And so we would need to get their buy-in. We'd have to work with them. 3.2.1, we'd work with Carol, but we wouldn't necessarily need to pull in TPZ.
Right.
Yeah, sooner or later, it's going to go through TPZ. If there's a new project, new site, it's going to need their approval. But I think, as Steve indicated earlier, that could be months or years away, to get it to that point.
Mark, I'm a little surprised that there wasn't more support for 3.4.1, which is ways to guide the location of multifamily housing, and 3.5.1, which has to do with guiding the design.
I think that was Mark's number 4.
That was
second tier.
Yep.
Yeah.
Second tier, but the first one in the second tier was this one.
Yeah.
Or explain to me, Steve, guiding the location. What do you? What would you see there?
Well, first of all, I thought that there would be more support for that idea so that developments didn't get popped down in an inappropriate location. But that, to me, like, to achieve that, you would
how would you do that?
You would go up to 3.3.6. You work with the DRD stuff.
Yeah, I think the idea behind the DRD is really to provide an alternative path for developers in lieu of an 830G set-aside application, so that we would be able to guide that a little bit more, both from a design standpoint as well as location standpoint, and also ensure that it was in an area that was appropriate for that type of use.
So by its nature, zoning guides the location of developments. But do you think there's any way that we could work on the design? Is TPZ ready to tackle that?
Yeah, I do. I think this is actually a good time because they're going through a rewrite of their zoning regulations, and they've talked about incorporating those elements into their regs. So I do think that this is a good time for us to raise the issue.
The other thing too, I think we've talked about before, the State Committee on Innovation and Growth, or whatever they call themselves, created out of Public Act 2129, does include, and was planning on putting together, a design guidebook. So it's quite possible, depending on what they come up with, that the heavy lifting, or much of the heavy lifting for Fairfield, could be done. And so now we pick it up and roll with it. So I think that, as we had talked about earlier in one of our meetings, Fairfield got a great assemblage of very talented architects, residents in town. So if we can get design guidelines together in some way, shape, or form to guide these sorts of efforts, they could embrace it and run with it. I think I had showed earlier that I did some work some years ago for a workforce housing overlay zone concept in another municipality. I think I might have shared those graphics with you, but joked with you that some of the pictures in there were from Fairfield, of some good designs which exist in the community already. So I think that we could push in that direction, and that could go in the zoning regs. And I think the comment about the location, the commission is also undertaking an update of the POCD. So we've already done some thinking as to where those locations could be, and that would be perhaps suggested in the affordable housing plan. But then the TPZ, as part of their work on the POCD, could incorporate that or refinement of that into the POCD, which is how it makes its way into the zoning regs and the zoning map. So that could be a tier 2 issue as well.
Mark, are you hoping to get agreement on the 5 that you mentioned in that your little doodle poll. Are those the 5 we want to go with? There are some others that are good, but
well, I can keep going if you want me to go beyond that. I'll just give you the next tier down. Again, there's a little bit of a gap. The top 3 were all the same point total, 5.57. The 2 that I just mentioned were 5.0 on the weighted average. The next one down is 3.86. And that's expanding opportunities to create middle housing, those 2 to 4 unit developments here in town. That was the next one. Below that, at 3.0, was building the housing trust fund through private donations. And then last, and again, at 2.43, again, pretty decent gap, was enhancing the housing trust fund by increasing the inclusionary zoning fee from the current 5 per thousand, something more than that. And that was universally ranked in the bottom half for all respondents. So it never got more than a 5th place vote.
And I'm sorry, wasn't one of the strategies increasing the length of the deed restriction?
Well, I picked some. Well, that was a write-in vote.
Oh, probably mine, I guess.
Yes, probably yours.
I like that one. Okay. Well, so how do we get agreement on the 5?
Well, I guess if there's, we could have some conversation about whether anyone has any issue with what we've laid out in terms of the top 3 and maybe the middle 2, and then beyond that, if somebody has some serious reservations to that, or other things that we didn't pick up on, such as the one you just mentioned, Steve. Mm-hmm. There was a whole group of strategies that I think either reflected things that are administrative in function, things that we should do, but not necessarily like reviewing and updating our standard affordability plan and deed restrictions. They're important, but they're more administrative in function. And there was other things that were more generic. They didn't have any specificity. They reflected things that we're currently doing, like continuing efforts to attract buyers through, down payment and closing cost assistance and things of that nature. So I think we just left those off. I mean, it's not that they're not important, but I don't think they rise to the same level of these other ones that we're talking about.
Mark?
Yes.
I actually just did the survey today because it was in my spam file. What can I say?
Well, I got your response. So it was incorporated in the feedback here.
Right. So, but I mean, as I said about my personal opinion, is that we can try to work with the different departments, planning and zoning and whatever other departments we need to work with to assure that some of these buildings and these developments are family friendly, because the ones going up now are not. None of these big buildings are family friendly, not for children. You cannot rear children in a brick building without having common areas, running areas, places for them to get outside and play other than playing in the street.
So I guess that would be more towards the looking at, the middle housing option as a way by which we can create those.
Right. So kind of
focus on larger units, like bedrooms, more than a 1-bedroom or studio apartment type.
Well, even if you have a 1-bedroom apartment and you have a small child, that's fine, but you don't have a place for them to play. Okay, you don't have a place for them to go outside or to interact with other kids that live in that development because they're confined to their apartment. So we need to find a way to do this. I mean, I'm just looking around, not just Fairfield, but other places that it's just very upsetting to me when we're supposed to be helping middle-class people get a step up in life and have a place to bring up their children. We're not affording that. It's not us, not us, but they're not being afforded places to grow and thrive.
But wouldn't that be, again, looking more towards those duplex, triplex, you know, those types,
well, again,
yard around
it, pocket housing, yeah, and in a neighborhood development, not in. I'm sorry, but the only thing I can say is prison-like buildings, as what's going up these days. I mean, 5-story building is, and they're not even conducive to elderly, to veterans, to anybody. They're basically for people that, you know, young kids or executives or whatever. Elderly people aren't going to live on the 5th floor. Okay, they need a place where they can actually go outside and interact as well. I mean, you know, I don't know. I thought,
yeah, I think you're touching on, we need housing options, more diversity of housing choice, but we shouldn't automatically presume that just because it doesn't work for our situation that people don't want to live in an amenity-rich apartment building, because there are obviously people who do.
And but, that's great.
I don't disagree with your statement.
Another option.
Well, no, I think there's actually people who are seeking that type of living arrangement out. It may not be the best. I agree with you. It may not be the best for families with kids, but there are others that it is fine. I don't think we should have all of one or all of the other. You need to have a lot of different choices.
Options, other options.
Yep.
A diverse amount of options so that people who want to live in those buildings, and there are a lot of people. I mean, my grandson lives in one, and they love it living like that because everything's at their fingertips. But then you have people with kids, and you've got elderly, and you've got veterans, and they don't necessarily need or want to live like that, but they still need the help.
Well, maybe that would be an area that, again, if that's more difficult maybe in some aspects to develop because it may require a higher level of subsidy because you're doing it at a less dense. Perhaps that would be an appropriate area for the Housing Trust Fund to concentrate on to do that type of small unit development type thing.
Right. I think I said that last time.
Yep.
I mean, if we're going to have a trust fund, we might as well try to work it into our community and the needs of the community as a whole.
Right. Which is, I think, exactly what you guys are doing with some of these investments you've made. They're more towards duplex and triplex that are surrounded by yards and more of a community living arrangement,
right?
Than these apartment buildings.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we have. We have to at least look at those options and put it out there to the developers and to the TPZ and everybody to kind of look in that direction. That's just my thought.
Are there other strategies that we should be doing to do exactly that?
Well, ask a question, Mark, about do we have existing regs that give a bonus to developers if they create community space or outside park areas? They do that in New York City. So
yep.
Do we do
I think
that
there's been some, I don't think it's actually in our regs, but there has been some conversation about whether or not that would merit, some type of incentive if there was an investment made for public space as part of the development.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So maybe that's an area too.
I mean, well, yeah, that's basically what we talked about last time about the incentives, and if it's possible to get incentives, tax incentive, permit incentives, whatever, so that we can cover everybody in the community, not just, you know, those that want to live in those types of buildings. And putting them in neighborhoods like mine is not conducive to what the neighborhoods are like. So we need to figure out, I mean, we're more of a housing, you know, houses, single house, but nobody that I've talked to during my campaigning and stuff said that they would be opposed to, I always say pocket housing, but a neighborhood setting. Nobody that I talked to would be opposed to that. Right now, they're just opposed to these big buildings.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we could kind of look at talking to people and seeing what can be done as far as incentive goes, I think that would be a benefit to us.
So, Mark, we can add that, you know, to one of the tiers, but can we go back to the 5 that I thought were going to be the top 5?
It sounded to me like that was part of the one that we had identified. Am I mistaken?
That would go to.
It's more of the explore. Get how it was phrased in the executive summary, but
Not deed restrictions. Consider ways to
3.4.
3.5.1, right? No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well,
3.4.1. 3.4.1.
Okay. But that's really kind of tied to 3.3.6, I believe.
Should 3.3.6 and 3.4 and 3.5 be combined into one?
That's a good idea, Carrie. Because that basically.
Not sure, Carrie, because I think the TPZ has got different tiers right now of sort of housing affordability approaches. They've got the Commerce Drive area, the town center areas. And I think if we're going to get into middle housing and even smaller scale, the design and location aspects are likely to be different for each of those locations. So I would urge the committee to think about whether or not we just want to have location and design standards associated with the design residence, or we really want it to be associated with sort of all types of, you know, 830Gs and other things.
I saw Joanne's comment consistent with 3.6.1, which in the survey was expanding opportunities to create middle housing. Those 2 to 4 unit developments. I think you had, at least I had highlighted. Okay. And maybe those could be consolidated into one concept.
Well, whatever we do, though, it's got to be something we can accomplish. And so if you put 2 or 3 or 4 ideas into one sentence, it's going to make it more difficult, I think, to accomplish. So you got to identify exactly.
Well, I think what you're doing is it's almost like and again, I think we'd have to go back to the actual plan, because this has been consolidated in such a way as I'm kind of losing the context here, but I'm sure what it is looking at ways in which we can create that middle type of housing by doing X, Y, and Z as examples. It's kind of a menu of options that we could look at and determine whether or not they're feasible and have support to move forward. Would that be a fair reading of what we're trying to capture in 3.6?
So if I looked at 3.6 and then numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 underneath it, I would say, all right, for 3.6, we want to gain 100 units over the next 5 years. And 20 would be from existing housing units, and 30 would be newly created, and 10 multifamily, and 20 mixed use. You know, I would have to have some sort of goal within each one of those, in my mind, in order for us to have it as a target.
Well, it better be an achievable goal, at least for some of them.
Yeah. So I like the 5, Mark, that you started out with.
Oh, you guys are the ones that picked them, not me.
Well, the ones that you enumerated at the very start, that we chose. Because we can have 20, but we need some priority ones that we're going to work on that we think are achievable.
Mark, I think Carrie's right in saying that we should combine 3.3, 0.6, 3.4.1, and 3.45.1 because they basically combine everything. So then you would only have like 3.3 and with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you'd have 3.4, 1, 2, 3.
Well, you can consolidate everything into one, but then you lose the meaning of all of it. And I think the DRD is a distinct approach that the Planning and Zoning Commission recognizes that they need to look at their DRD overlay zone regulations and make some adjustments. So I think that probably deserves to stand alone by itself. And that was one of your top 3, which was different than the other 2 below it. Now, one is, and again, I think something gets lost in the translation when we kind of summarize these into like one bullet point. If we go back and look at the actual strategy, there's a lot more meat to it than that. And I'm not sure they're quite the same thought here as well. They're quite different. But I mean, to your point, I don't see why, again, there's going to be a lot of conversation, and some of it's going to be prompted by folks at the state level as to, you know, whether or not we should look at, you know, creating opportunities for smaller units, such as what's being proposed here, this middle housing idea. So I do think it's worthwhile including it. And I just think maybe what we need to do is provide a little bit more within this executive summary. I think we need to provide a little bit more context so that people understand what we're actually proposing. And I don't disagree with Steve in that it would be helpful probably to both give a time frame for implementation, but also a numerical goal as well. If we're all about, you know, creating more housing options, more affordable units with the eye towards getting enough points to achieve a moratorium, then I think we should lay out, you know, how we're going to do that and how many units we might create, or when we think we might actually get to the moratorium based on points. And I know that's been elusive to say the least, because we thought we'd already be here or be there at this point, given the 2014 plan.
So let me just note the time. It's 8:15. And I'm hoping that we're giving Glenn some stuff that he can work with.
I think you are, Mr. Chairman, and I think Mark was starting to comment. I felt a little bit that there's enough moving pieces at this point in time. It's hard to envision them all. But I think I've got my sense right now, if the fire alarm got pulled and we're all headed for the exits, and I had to summarize where I think we're at, clearly here we're going to make the executive summary smaller, and we're going to focus in on the things that are the highest priorities. I think that leads us back to the main document. And I think I can be a little bit more ruthless here in terms of the number of pages in this document. Focus in on the priorities we've talked about. As Mark indicated, some of the items which are more administrative in nature don't need to be spelled out in exclusive detail. I did that because I felt that if we were going to get planning and zoning to put the requirements in their regulations for these things, we had to do our homework first, which is why I listed them. But I think we can move those well down the order. So my sense right now on the main report would be to cut its length significantly, reorganize it based on the priorities that we've talked about here tonight. And I think try to get to number of units and time frame to the extent possible. I may need some help with that from the committee, but I think that we can get there more easily if the report is reorganized. So my thought is that I'm actually kind of anxious to get started. I think to take this document, reorganize it the way we've talked about it, make it shorter, more concise. The committee will always have this draft version to refer back to if you ever feel you need to. If you're twiddling your thumbs because you don't have things to do, there's going to be things in this report. But I think to make this a more visionary document going forward and more strategic, I think it would be a great outcome.
I also think we have to stress that we have to work with all these other boards. We have no authority. And sometimes when we say we're going to achieve this and achieve that, we don't have the authority always to do it. So it's really working with TPZ or whoever else to encourage them to set the stage for these things to happen.
And that's actually, Carrie, why I think I might, in the next version, not combine 3.5 and 3.4 with 3.3.6, because they're all actually coordinating or partnering with different entities on different things.
Yeah, okay.
Mushing them together doesn't really, it kind of muddies the message, and keeping them separate might make it clearer. But so my sense right now, Steve, is that if it's okay with the committee, I will take both of these documents, edit the living daylights out of them to reorganize them the way we talked about, have it back to you next week, which would be a week in advance of our meeting on February 9th. And that presumably would get us much closer to where I think the committee wants to be here, and allow us now to get into the fine tuning stage going forward.
Okay. Do we need to talk about the overall plan itself tonight? Or just covering the executive summary is enough material for you?
I think I've got the organization, Steve, which I think is key. But I also think, as we were chatting through the executive summary, is also referring back to the main report. And I think that based on our conversation here about the benefit of being strategic in nature, leads me to the conclusion that we can accomplish as much as we want in a shorter document. We don't have to have all of the nitty-gritty detail that we've got right now in the full version. And that led me to the conclusion to cut the number. I don't know that I can cut it in half, but I think I can get the points across that we need to, and make it a more strategic document. So that's what I would propose to do. And if the committee says at our meeting on February 9th, oh, I really miss, this section, well, we've got it, we can add it back in. I think getting to a more strategic document that gives you guys the numerical goal and time frames and the priorities of how we're going to interact with others, I think makes it a much more useful document.
And could you send it to us both in a PDF and in Word? Can you send a document that we can edit?
I'm pausing, Steve, because I had a bad experience in the past with that. So I'm reluctant to do it. So just let me explain to you what happened in the past. Word has styles built into the document, and everybody's computer reflects their own style settings that they have. So when the document gets opened up, styles get overwritten. And then when they all try to come back together again, it goes to, places unknown. So I've had to totally strip down a document to raw text and reformat it and reconstruct it, and it's painful. And I can't charge for it. It's just, so I'm reluctant to do so. So
let's just mark it up and then we can scan it and send it to Glenn.
Yeah, that's I can do what I need to do, so that's fine. Not to worry.
Okay, well, I mean, I think, let me think about it, Steve. What I may be prepared to do is to share the document in Word format, but when it comes back,
I don't have to do that. I figured out I can do what I need to do by myself, so that's okay.
Okay,
just
all right. Okay.
But I think it's important that we do mark it up and send you back a markup. We can talk about things, but it's better for you to have them on your desk and you can look at them later on. And
yep. So I think I have what I feel I need to get to the next step. Is there any other instructions from the committee you would like to give me?
So that process calendar you were going to work on, or Mark was going to work on?
I have it on my action list.
Okay. We've got the executive summary, and I don't think there's anything else for you. Nope. That's all I have. I don't know if Janice or Gwen or Nina, Bob, Herb, Gretchen, anybody else have any questions or comments for Glenn?
Thank you, everybody, for your input tonight. I found it very helpful. Thank you.
We're getting there.
So for us, the next thing is to talk about the annual report, which Mark sent out again today.
Yep.
And Mark, let me just make sure, Bob and Herb had sent along some comments. So Glenn received those, right?
Comments on the executive summary, the things we just talked about?
No, your comments on strategy and on the overall, the first draft of the plan.
Yes.
Okay. Yes is what I wanted to hear, so that's good. Okay, good. So on the annual report that you sent out, do you need the committee to approve it, or do you want to talk about, well, thank you. You've already shaded in the areas at the bottom.
I was able to get this reformatted. Hopefully that's clear.
Yeah.
Yes, that is.
Yeah.
So the format essentially follows the format from years past, or at least the last year's format. So we provide a brief overview or summary of the committee's activities during the course of the year. Obviously, this past year was spent mostly on the affordable housing plan, getting that started. And then there was also several discussions and actions related to the Housing Trust Fund, used the fund to purchase several properties, both to assist with the Parkview Commons redevelopment, and then also more recently with 244 Greenfield Street, the opportunity that arose there. And then we also work with Fair Plan and Fairfield Senior Advocates to obtain changes to the zoning regulations to foster accessory dwelling units, which the commission acted upon earlier in about this time last year. So, and now they're currently contemplating further revisions to that to liberalize those regulations. So that's certainly good news. Is there anything on this page that anyone wanted to talk about or question?
I thought it was good.
Okay. Then we provided just an update, because this is the topic of most concern, I think, to a lot of members of the RTM, which is where we are as relates to the 10% goal, and more specifically to achieving a moratorium under Section 8-30G. So I provided provided an overview of that. This is an estimate, and then based on what we think the projected points associated with each of these developments, then we talk a little bit about those developments that occurred this past year. And then an overview of the Housing Trust Fund, both in terms of revenues raised during the course of the year, as well as any disbursements from the fund and what they were used for.
Mark, can you go back to the top? I'm sorry, on the
sure.
Yeah, on the moratorium status. So we need 433. We've got 363. We need another 70. And so in progress is not only that 70, but about half the number we would need for the next moratorium.
Yeah, and I've noted that under construction or approved that are expected to go forward. So there's a large contingent that is in that category. And the issue is the timing of those, because you only get the points once they've been placed into service, once they've received their certificate of occupancy. So as I mentioned before, we have two projects currently under construction that conceivably, well, one conceivably will be completed this year. In other words, we would get points from the development at 78 Umpqua Place. And the other project at 528 Black Rock Turnpike, they've poured the foundation walls, but they really haven't done much beyond that. So again, based on where we are today, it's hard for me to imagine that will actually be CO'd before the end of the calendar year. It's more likely 2023. So that's part of the issue here. We have a number of projects that are even further behind in terms of where they are in the development pipeline. They've been reviewed and approved. Some are in litigation because there's been an appeal taken. Some, the developer, for whatever reason, is either in the process of securing financing or just hasn't pulled a building permit yet. May do so in the near future, but again, it's usually a 18-month construction cycle. So that's the issue.
And have you ever had discussions with a developer, finance people, about at what interest rate these projects don't become viable? The 830Gs have proliferated over the last, call it 7 or 8 years, when we've had extremely low
cheap money. Yeah.
And so if instead of 4.5%, if they have to do 7%, would they do a development? I think that, I don't know how we factor that in, but we've got to think about that, because the interest rates are going to rise little by little. So, okay, that's all.
Any questions on the bottom half, the Housing Trust Fund? So again, I was trying to be consistent to the format that was used in reporting this past year, so they could do a quick comparison from year to year.
So that second line where it says income dash fees, that really means that's the inclusionary zoning fee that we received during 2021. Largely,
yes. We're getting a small amount of rental income from some of the holdover tenants within the Parkview Commons development, but that, most of it is inclusionary zoning fees.
So is there a reason why you didn't want to say that? Because when you've got income dash fees,
it's small that I don't know if we should spend that much time talking about it.
Okay, you'll have to when you go to RTM, but that's okay. Because they're gonna ask.
You're gonna go to RTM.
Yeah, we'll go together. Okay. On the next page then.
So the next page, let's see if I can switch this around. So this just provides a summary of developments that contribute points or estimated housing unit equivalency points under the Connecticut General Statutes 830G. So I think somebody had asked for a list of developments, but I wanted to again be consistent with the report previously that was talking about moratorium. So this number hope matches the number in the moratorium spreadsheet.
So that you've got the 363.5, which is the number on the prior page.
Yeah.
And then that's the only one that's that's the most relevant number on this last page.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, if people want to know where these units are and how many units there are and that type of thing.
Yep. Okay.
And that's it. You know, we had a map this past year, and we've lost some staff within the engineering department, and the folks that are new are having difficulty replicating the map to my satisfaction. So I'm not sure it's worthwhile including it. It's not up to the level that I would like to see. If I had additional time, I would work with them to try to refine that. But Glenn has also asked for the same information from MetroCog. It's essentially the same thing. I had a map previously that showed these developments within the context of RTM districts and census tract areas. So you got a sense geographically of where each development is located. Mm-hmm. And the type of development. And that was requested by the an RTM member a couple of years ago. And the map I had previously just hasn't been updated to include most recent developments that have been completed this past year. So there's three developments that are not included. I'm just having a devil of a time getting something that looks good, that I feel represents our work here. So maybe we'll have something subsequent that I can provide based on our conversations with the folks at MetroCog. Again, Glenn had asked for the same type of information. He wanted to incorporate that into the plan. So it might be something we provide to them subsequently.
And Mark, is that kind of map something you need for HUD when you do the annual plan?
No. No, we don't necessarily need it.
Okay. I knew just be nice if you're going to do the work that you could use it for 2 or 3 of other.
Well, it does come up. My ultimate goal would be to have an interactive map feature on the town's website that people can scroll over and identify a particular housing development and get information about that housing development including who to contact if they're interested in getting an apartment. Mm-hmm. Or a condo or whatever. So ultimately I'd like to make it a useful tool that resides on our website so that people that are looking for housing can find this information, find out a little bit about what the development looks like and where it's located, and the key data points, but also a point of contact if they're interested in pursuing it further.
That seems like a very good thing to have, and it also seems doable. Just take time. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Do you need the committee to formally approve this, or?
Well, I guess it would be good. I think it would be good to have the committee authorize the filing or approve the submission of this report to the RTM for 2021. If that would be good. I think that would be good.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Joanne.
And then I think, Carrie, did you second it?
Sure, I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Raise your hand. No one's opposed. It passes unanimously.
Steve, I think we're going to be looking at, I'll confirm this, but I believe the RTM meeting in February is the 28th, and there'll be committee meetings on the 22nd.
22nd and 28th?
Right.
And I think those are going to be fine. 22nd is a Tuesday, right?
The 22nd would be a Tuesday. I think the 21st is a holiday.
Yeah, and 28th, Monday. Yep, right now they're fine. So,
good.
What about, there were other groups listed in that process. When do we get to talk to groups?
This is on the affordable housing plan?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I have talked to a number of groups on behalf of the committee. I've met with the Rotary Club. I've met with the Fairfield faith leaders, you know, several other groups here to let them know that we were updating the Affordable Housing Committee. The thing that's different this year, and I did reach out to a couple neighborhood groups, but you know, again, because of the pandemic, I don't know too many people are actually having in-person get-togethers or meetings. I suppose if we're doing it in a format such as this, it doesn't have to be, you know, specific to one group or a neighborhood. We could just have an informational meeting on Zoom, or even, you know, do something like this and tape record it and then put it up on a website. And let people interact with it as they would like. So I think there is time within the schedule, and we probably want to refine the presentation I gave earlier, which was a little light on the strategies because we hadn't spent a lot of time talking about them. But I think now is probably the time when we're going to do that the next month, just to give people a preview. And maybe get a little bit of practice, as well as some feedback on whether or not people think we're on the right track. And I think too, you know, answering people's questions regarding affordable housing in general. And I'm sure, you know, there's going to be some interest in that. So it might just, you might want to just do a Zoom type presentation or informational workshop or something like that, and then put it up on the website for people to view later if they can't attend or participate. And rather than trying to get out, there's only a couple of us, so I don't know how many groups we're going to be able to see in the next 3-4 weeks.
So I like the Zoom idea very much. If we can market it enough, you know, if people know that it's going to be available, and I don't think we'll get 100 people, but your Zoom allows you to do how many, do you know?
I'll have to check the limits, but I think we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
I think I got the pro account. I signed up for that to give us a little bit more room so that we could have a bigger workshop session if we needed to.
Yeah.
Mark,
So
can
again,
we
I
put
like
it in
that.
the
I like
newspaper? Can
Sorry,
we put it in the community section of the newspaper?
Sure.
The patch?
Yep.
That'll
Brenda's
people read that a lot.
newsletter. Yeah.
Yeah.
We could even give them a little survey beforehand, right?
Well, now you're testing my Zoom capabilities. I'm barely able to screen share. Come on, give me a break.
No. We know you can do anything, Mark. Okay. So the annual report is approved. That's all on the agenda. But let me ask about Janice and Nina. Will they be approved? Is it next week or
I
2
think
weeks?
Monday. Yeah, I believe
Monday?
so.
Okay. Good. So with that, unless somebody else has some new business or comments or questions, we can adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right,
Good night,
everyone.
Have a good night.
All right. Good night.